The United Kingdom is concerned by the ongoing detention of government critics in Zimbabwe, including Job Sekhala MP. The Minister of State for Africa and Development raised these concerns and the case of Job Sekhala specifically with Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa when they met in the margins of His Majesty the King's coronation last month.
My Lords, I thank the Minister for that answer, and I welcome to the public gallery Stephen Van Zandt and Jerry Dammers, musicians and songwriters who have done so much to campaign for freedom and justice in southern Africa. Does the Minister agree that today freedom and justice is under vicious assault in Zimbabwe? Will he and his ministerial colleagues work with SADC ministers and the Commonwealth to make clear to ZANU-PF that there can be no return to normal relations until Job Sekhala and all political detainees are released, political violence stops, and genuinely free and fair elections take place?
My Lords, may I firstly acknowledge the noble Lord's insights and indeed his expertise on all issues in Zimbabwe. He knows the country very well, and I appreciate its tabling of the question. With regards to the specific issue of human rights and the importance to progress on human rights before the elections on the 23rd of August, of course, I assure the noble Lord we are engaging with all key partners, including, as he will be aware, that Zimbabwe is very keen to progress its membership of the Commonwealth as well. The issue of human rights is a pertinent part of that assessment, and I know we're working very closely with the Secretariat in that respect. Ultimately, if Zimbabwe joins the Commonwealth, it will be a matter for all members of the Commonwealth, and therefore it needs a cross-Commonwealth approach to this. I assure the noble Lord also we are fully seized with the issue of the different abuses of human rights which regrettably and tragically continue to happen, and even this morning I've heard of further arrests in this respect. The information is still coming through, but I am aware of further arrests that have been made. We've called for full transparency, the release of those who are being held in an arbitrary fashion, and indeed where cases are being pressed, that those court cases are held in a very transparent form.
The Minister, I'm grateful to him for his reply about Job Sekhala, but it's not just Job Sekhala who has been arrested. 6 students have been arrested as well for doing nothing more than actually protesting against politicians being arrested themselves. Emmanuel Chichima, Comfort Mapufu, Nanel Madamombi, Benjamin Watazda, Donington Chigwena, Gamuchirai Chamburu Munda. Students, exotic names, my lords, but they're not being kept in exotic conditions. They're in prison for protesting perfectly legally and freely. And I think we've got to wake up to the fact that Emmerson Mnangagwa is actually more of the same after the evil Mugabe.
My Lords, my noble friend raises a number of cases, and of course I assure my noble friend that we are fully aware of those particular cases. We remain deeply concerned by the failure to address the allegations of abduction and abuse of opposition members. There's the cases also of Joanna Mamumba, which he raised, Cecilia Chimbiri and Netsai Morova. I assure the noble Lords we've raised our concerns with the government and also publicly called for full investigation into these allegations. It is vitally important that if Zimbabwe wishes to be counted amongst those countries that are not just recognised for progression on a bilateral basis, but also, importantly, within multilateral organisations, that they stand up and ensure transparency of justice systems, but also ensuring that those who are taken and arrested are done so on charges which are transparent, and when they're not held on any charges which clearly are substantial, that they are released. And the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of protest are key parts of any progressive democracy.
My Lords, many of us warned for many years that Mnangagwa would be worse than Mugabe, particularly because of his years of repression and particularly what happened in Matabeleland. He's clearly not going to change, and sadly invitations to the coronation don't help. It helps him in Zimbabwe. However, could the noble Lord the Minister accept that it's very unlikely that there will be genuinely free and fair elections in August in Zimbabwe, and that it is time? And we saw just last night a very, very well-respected human rights lawyer, Obey Shava, being almost beaten to death by ZANU-PF thugs. Is it not time that we stop pandering in some way to Mnangagwa and condemn, really condemn, what is happening there right throughout the country, loudly and clearly to the international world?
My Lords, I also welcome the noble lady's deep insights and expertise on Zimbabwe, and I am aware of the case this morning, and literally as I sat down I got an update on the alleged attacks on the lawyer. I am in the process of getting further information on that particular attack. Will then update the House and the noble lady accordingly. I also agree with the noble lady the actions that we've seen by the President on Zimbabwe and his government, particularly on areas of legislative change, which they're also bringing into force, are of deep concern and alarming concern, because it does mean the suppression of civil society within Zimbabwe. These are key tenets, as I said, of any democratic reform, and the openness and the vibrancy of civil society is a key part of that, as well as the other cases we've already heard. And I assure noble lords we want to work very constructively on this agenda. There is a lot of expertise in your lordship's house, and we want to leverage that to ensure that we can continue to make the case pertinently, forcefully, and one hopes to ensure progression on the ground.
My Lords,
Final point. The noble Lord the Minister knows I have stressed the importance of civil society, because when states fail their citizens, it's civil society that stands up for human rights. And I have urged the noble Lord the Minister to actually support civil society in the broadest terms, including trade unionists who have been under attack in Zimbabwe. And what is the government doing, and what is the FCDO doing to contact global trade union institutions? So it's not just our voice, but it's voices throughout the world that condemn this action and that can promote a free and fair election. Will he give me that assurance? He will contact international trade union institutions.
My Lords, I can give the noble Lord that assurance, and may I request him as well, if I may. He will have extensive contacts in this respect, particularly on the focus on Zimbabwe, and I'd welcome his insights as to the key components, key organisations and individuals. But I assure the noble Lord we have engaged directly with the government on Zimbabwe, particularly on the PVO amendment bill and the so-called patriotic amendments, but we regard all these changes, the private voluntary